All right, put yourself in my shoes real quick. All right. I've been doing deeper dives where I break down fights for the UFC since UFC 268. That's 2021, right? And every single pay-per-view cards, I pick the two most intriguing fights, usually maybe three. So it depends, right? Maybe it's two, maybe it's three, maybe it's one if the pay-per-view card is really trash. But what we do is we break down the most interesting fights on the pay-per-view cards so that you guys have something to look forward to. So we write a script, we write a compelling intro, write something engaging. I record the scripts, we edit the video. But then imagine having to do all of that, preparing, structuring, writing scripts for the fights to be just fall off and just not happen. So then what do you do? Do I just put up the video of a fight that's just not going to happen? Will you watch it? That's a good question. That's a question for you. Maybe you can answer me in the comment. Would you watch a segment of a breakdown, a breakdown of a fight that isn't happening? It's going to be hard. I feel like attention span is like, you're going to be looking at it like deep down in your mind. Like, how can I get hype at this if this fight is not happening? So then the other option is just to cut it out, but then the videos will be, not as interesting because there's just one of it. But yeah, I mean, that was the option. In my mind, it was like, all right, I will probably just cut off the entire segment and just break down Pereira versus Magomed Ankalaev unless they announce something interesting. Unless they announce a fight that is worth talking about, that is worth breaking down. And this is what the UFC came with. Justin Gaethje versus Rafael Fiziev 2. A UFC 313 that's happening in 10 days. So Fiziev is coming back from a ACL injury. He lost to Gaethje at UFC 286 almost 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago. He lost to Gaethje, then lost to Mateusz Gamrot, had a bad injury in that fight, torn ACL, which Derrick Rose, my favorite basketball player of all time, he had to, not play for like a year and a half and then never came back the same and basically was an entire different fighter. I was going to say fighter, but an entire different player because of that ACL injury. ACL injuries are bad, really bad. And he's coming off 2 losses, a year and a half layoff, an ACL injury to fight Gaethje for the rematch on a 10, 12 days notice. That is insane. That is absolutely insane. And when I first saw that announcement, I was like, immediately in my mind, I went back to the first fight and I thought Fiziev should have won. That's my opinion. Y'all can let me know what you think, but the first fight, when I watched it, I thought Fiziev clearly won. And for some reason, the narrative switched because the commentator was telling me that Gaethje had won. But I was like, bro, what? What did you guys watch? Fiziev absolutely destroyed him in the first round, had incredible moments early in the second round, and then Gaethje found some momentum late in the second round, but didn't do enough, in my opinion, to win that second round. And then he beat him up in the third round. Fiziev was too tired. Or I don't know, he was just beat up. I don't know if he even beat him up that bad, but visually it looked like, it looked crazy. So I understand that third round clearly went to Gaethje, but I thought the first 2 rounds went to Fiziev, in my opinion. And then so looking back at that fight, looking back at the fact that Gaethje's coming off one of the worst KO in UFC history, worst KO imaginable, 5-round beatdown, and then you get KO'd last second. Like, you didn't only just get punched in the face by Max Holloway 1,000 times or almost 1,000 times, and then you had to get KO'd in the last second as well. So he's coming off one of the worst physical beatdown in a fight you could ever imagine. That's my first thought process. I was like, yeah, he's 36, coming off the worst KO imaginable against a hungry Fiziev who's like lost by decision in the first fight. I think he actually thought he lost. I remember watching an interview where I was like, bro, you should think you won that because I think you won that. And I think a lot of people think that. Maybe not majority of people think that. But there was a few people that I saw was like, bro, that decision should have went to Fiziev. I was one of them. I don't know if he thought that, or I don't know if he cared about it that much. But I just know that coming off a close fight like the first one, he's going to be hungry, right? So my first thought was like, Gaethje's done. Fiziev is going to win this. But like I just told you, all the circumstances makes this almost impossible for me to pick Fiziev here. If I'm looking at on paper, the circumstances, even though they're not the best for Gaethje, because he is 36, he is coming off the worst KO of his career, of any fucking body's career, to be honest. It was the worst beatdown imaginable, or at least not a crazy beatdown, but like, it's just the fact that you get punched in the face for 5 rounds and then get KO'd in the last. It's tough to come back from that, physically and mentally. You know what I mean? So all of that combined, even though these circumstances are bad, I feel like Fiziev's circumstances are even worse. They're even worse. He hasn't won a fight in almost 2 years, lost 2 back-to-back, had a ACL injury, surgery. That's probably crazy for the body as well. So I'm looking at it like it's going to be tough. On top of what I just told you, he's fighting in on 12 days notice, 10 days notice probably. This is happening next Saturday. We're Wednesday. So yeah, it's 10 days away. I'm thinking the circumstances are just too difficult to overcome for Fiziev. So that's why I'm probably going to go with Gaethje here, just because of the circumstances. If they were on equal playing field, I'd probably go Fiziev. In my opinion, I would. But Gaethje still has, hopefully he still has that a little bit of chin left, because the first one is going to be tough. I know Fiziev is going to throw bombs. If he can get through that, I think he wins that fight. The UFC didn't announce just this fight. They announced some other good fights as well. Jamal Hill versus Khalil Rountree is absolutely a banger of a fight, and they're doing it as a fight night as well. Well deserved. There's some history as well, because these two were booked before, and Hill had talked a lot of shit. Khalil Rountree popped for something. I think he self-admittedly went to the UFC and told them like, yo, he took this supplement and he's probably going to test for it. He's going to pop for it. So yeah, it wasn't like a cheating scandal per se, but he did get suspended for, I think, 4 months. So that fight was scrapped at the time. Or I think actually Jamal Hill pulled out? I think, yeah, Jamal Hill pulled out first and then Khalil tested for something. Or no, Khalil tested first, so he pulled out, and then Jamal pulled out after, because Jamal didn't fight at UFC 303. So I remember that fight was booked for UFC 303. So it was a whole bunch of shit. But yeah, I think Khalil popped first, so he was removed. Jamal Hill was supposed to fight some other dude, maybe Anthony Smith. I don't remember exactly, but there was a lot of changes that happened. But this fight was booked before, and there were some trash talk as well. I remember Hill was like, when people were talking about Khalil, he was like, bro, Khalil's not on my level. I'm going to show him levels. But that was before the Pereira fight, so I don't know if he's going to be saying the same stuff, because, you know, when you look at both of their fight with Pereira, you can tell there's a major discrepancy in danger and power and skills, all of it, in terms of, you know, who both of these fighters are. So I think it's a pretty easy pick. I think going with Khalil Rountree here is very, very easy. Yeah, it's the one to go with. I think he's going to pick him apart, and he's probably going to TKO him in the second round, something like that. So that would be my early predictions for this one. But it's going to be very interesting to see. And you just have to respect Jamal, because he's taking the dangerous fights. He really is. He's not running away from it. When he talks shits, he backs it up and goes in the octagon and fight. And you have to respect a guy like that. He's not a Colby Covington where he talks so much shit but never backs up his talk, never fights the guys that he talks shits about. Annoying. Jamal Hill, he talks shit. He might be delusional and annoying for you guys. I get it. I made a big video about him back in the day. It was like 3-4 months ago, whatever, during the Pereira scandal. So, you know, I broke it down, and I know what it was. It was delusion. But you have to respect a guy that still shows up and fight and takes the hard fight, takes the dangerous matchups. That's what Jamal Hill is doing, really. So coming from Pereira, Yuri, and then Khalil, I mean, that's a tough lineup right here. So that's not even it, though. The UFC also announced Silva versus Mitchell. You know, Jean Silva was an option for Gaethje. I think Silva, the people were talking about him like he could step up and fight Gaethje on a few days' notice after his performance. I think it was last weekend where he didn't take any damage. He knocked out the dude in the first round in a few seconds, maybe a minute and a half, something like that. I don't remember, but it was a crazy performance. He didn't take any damage. People were like, he could just, you know, go again and be the guy to step up. There was also Gamrot. I think Gamrot was an option for Gaethje, and then there was Moicano, I think, was an option. And I think Silva and Fiziev were the two best options. They went with Fiziev, and I knew it. I was sure, and in my mind, I was also hopeful that they don't put Silva in this position because they have a star on their hand. And I know the UFC has done a great job, and we love the UFC for that because they're not boxing. They don't just wait out for stars and fight bums until they have a 26-0 record and then they fight each other. You know what I mean? Like, up-and-comers fight up-and-comers, prospect, get tested. That's why we love the UFC. Like, guys that need to be fighting each other, fight each other, and we have to respect that. But there's a limit. Like, Silva is just coming up, you know what I mean? And he's a featherweight. So for him to take a Gaethje fight on a few days' notice, Gaethje, who's a known brawler, who's had a training camp, it was like a very, very risky move. And why would you have to take this risk when you have a Bryce Mitchell who's been talking about Hitler, right? So it's like the UFC are kind of like win-win in this scenario because they clearly want Mitchell to get beat up. And Dana White has been like vocal about this in his last, when he talked about the whole Mitchell situation, he was vocal about it. Like, if you're a UFC fan and you don't like Mitchell now, well, you have the chance to watch him get beat up. It's like, it's crazy as a promoter that you can say that, but he did say it. So it was like clear his intentions was like, he was going to feed him to an up-and-coming prospect, but they didn't just feed him to a random up-and-coming prospect. They fed him the most dangerous featherweight in the moment, at the moment, the most powerful striker that they can find at featherweight. And so he's getting Silva, which is going to be a horrible, horrible matchup for Mitchell. But like I said, I wanted to end my point. I'm glad the UFC did that, so they didn't just risk everything by throwing Silva to Gaethje on a few days' notice. And then they can keep both. They can build Silva as a star of the featherweight division now that Topuria is gone. They can build some names for that division. That's what they're supposed to do, and they made the right decision, in my opinion, here. But as of this matchup, technically speaking, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. Remember that fight against Topuria? I have a sentiment that this is going to look pretty similar. This is what I think. When you have a guy in Silva who's so well-rounded, who's going to be prepared to to stuff takedowns, to sprawl. He's fast and explosive and has good reflexes, and he's so strong. You have a guy like this. When you take away the takedown abilities of Bryce Mitchell, he is just so novice on the feet that it doesn't pose a threat to Silva. If you're fighting Jean Silva, you need to have somewhat of a threat on the feet. He needs to respect your striking and your power and what's coming back at him, so that he doesn't just run through you. And that's what's been happening against the guys he's fighting. He has no respect for them. He's way too playful, touching gloves, hugging, kissing, laughing. Like, bro, this is a fight, and like, he needs, you know what I mean? He needs to fight a guy that is, can give him respect, or not giving him respect, can earn the respect from him, I should say. And Bryce Mitchell is the complete opposite of that. His striking is atrocious. He reminds me of Khabib Nurmagomedov earlier on when he was throwing uppercut, running forwards, trying to find a takedown. Well, you know what I mean? Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but it's just not enough to be a threat, not enough to earn Silva's respect. Yeah, it's not going to look good. And if I had to make an early prediction, it's going to be Silva by murder. Now, I don't want to be mean, but Mitchell is, he's one of those guys. Like, just I don't really understand. Like, you have Gaethje, who's also doing the same thing. Like, their mentality is so strong, man. Like, coming off of a brutal knockout, the way Gaethje's coming off, fighting Fiziev, he was fighting Hooker still. Like, it's putting yourself in that in that risk. And then Mitchell, who's not coming off, but was knocked out 2 fights ago, like probably one of the worst knockouts as well in UFC history. He was seizuring on the ground. To go and fight Silva, who's a dangerous striker like this, you have to respect their mental strength. Like I said, I don't think these guys are the same fucking species as us. I don't know how mentally they're able to go over it. I think it's just a matter of not caring. They just care very little about the consequences. I feel like us humans, we think a lot about what can go wrong, what can go good, and we overthink a lot. You know what I mean? But the best versions of humankind, the greatest versions of our species, like the highest tier of humans, they don't think about the risk. They don't even think about what could go right or wrong. They just do what they're supposed to do. That's what these guys are doing, and I have the utmost respect for them forever because of it. So as much as I love picking fights and, you know what I mean, make fun and joke, these are guys that mentally needs to be like studied, really, because in my mind, I'm like, bro, if I go to the gym and I get beat up, right? Get beat up at the gym. The next day, I'm going to have a thought in my mind that's like, do I want to go back? You know what I mean? Then you have these guys that get knocked out, seizured on the ground in front of millions of people, and they sign up for another fight. They get paid, so fair enough, but the mentality is crazy. But anyways, I have to go write some scripts. I have to go figure out, what I'm going to do with this deeper dive. So wish me luck. I'm going to, yeah. It's a lot of work, man. MMA content creators, tip my hat off to you guys because, man, so much shit to cover. Take care, boys.